Good morning, dear students. A very warm welcome to the English literature class. Today, we are going to begin with a new short story from our literature syllabus. Unit number 4, Hearts and Hands by O. Henry. Today, we are going to discuss the introductory part of the chapter. Some introductory elements regarding this particular chapter. William Sidney Porter was an American writer who wrote under the pen name O. Henry. His short stories are well known for their ready wit, gentle humor, and surprise endings. So the real name of our writer is William Sidney Porter. Almost all the famous writers will be having different names. They will be having a real name, but they will be using one another name when they write a work, when they write a story or poem or play, etc. And that particular name is being known as pen name. Something like a hidden or secret name. So William Sidney Porter usually writes under the pen name O. Henry. So just imagine, whenever you read a work of O. Henry, his original name is not O. Henry but William Sidney Porter. So he was an American citizen, an American writer who wrote number of short stories, and all his short stories are well known for its ready wit, gentle humor, and surprise endings. Because of his way of writings, he has got number of readers throughout the world. So here we are going to study such a story written by O. Henry or William Sidney Porter with the title Hearts and Hands. A very interesting story which is having a very surprise end. So without wasting time, let's move to the other parts of the chapter. His story, Hearts and Hands, describes the chance encounter on a train between two acquaintances, Miss Fairchild and Mr. Aston. The situation turns awkward when Miss Fairchild notices that Aston is handcuffed to a grim-looking man. Before we go to the paragraph, let's look into a few new words. First one, encounter. Accidentally be in the same place and interact. So we meet somebody in a public place or in the same place accidentally, and we interact with that person. That's what is meant by encounter. So in the paragraph you can see it in the second line, second word, encounter on a train. So meeting somebody accidentally on train. So that's what is meaning meant here. The next word is acquaintance, a relationship less intimate than friendship. It will be something like a friendship, but it is not very close like a friendship. You know that person, but you do not know much about the person. Something like a familiar personality. You do not know much about that. He is not a stranger to you, at the same time you do not have much idea about that person. Acquaintance. Now let's see what is being discussed in this paragraph. His story, that means O. Henry's story, Hearts and Hands, describes the chance encounter on a train between two acquaintances, Miss Fairchild and Mr. Aston. So these are the two important characters of this story, Miss Fairchild and Mr. Aston. So they have met by chance on a train, and they started to talk about number of matters. So that's what is the beginning or the first scene of the story is conveying. The situation turns awkward when Miss Fairchild notices that Aston is handcuffed to a grim-looking man. So everything was moving so smooth and fine. But at the same time, at a moment, Miss Fairchild notices something. She noticed that Aston is handcuffed to a grim looking man. What is handcuff? I hope you might be knowing. It's an instrument used by the police to lock a criminal. Their hands will be tied together by the handcuffs. So when she noticed, she had seen that Mr. Aston is handcuffed to a grim looking man, a person or one another man who was sitting next to him. So when Miss Fairchild noticed about it, things got changed, because she started to feel like she is talking with a criminal. So that's why she thought about the social status. So that's why things has got changed. Still then everything was so smooth. Now things became very tough and strange. The man advances to save Weston from embarrassment and prevent the girl from discovering the truth about him. It is only through the observations of their fellow passengers that the reader is made aware of the real nature of the relationship between the two men handcuffed to each other. Here there is a new word for you. Embarrassment. Embarrassment means the shame you feel when your inadequacy or guilt is made public. Just imagine you have made a mistake and somebody disclosed it to the public. When everybody comes to know about it, what will be your feeling? A kind of shame. And that particular feeling is being known as embarrassment. Somebody disclosed your mistake in public, or it is made public. So the particular feeling which you experience at that moment is embarrassment. So the man advances to save Weston from embarrassment and prevent the girl from discovering the truth about him. The man who was handcuffed to Mr. Aston, he intervenes to save Weston from embarrassment, because when Miss Fairchild noticed that his hand was handcuffed with one another person, it created a stress in the scene. It created a very different atmosphere in the story. In order to solve all those problems, the other man intervenes, and he was trying to save Weston from embarrassment and prevent the girl from discovering the truth about him. Actually, in the story, something is happening and it is being disclosed at the end of the story. So there you will come to know what really or who really was Mr. Aston. It's only through the observations of their fellow passengers that the reader is made aware of the real nature of the relationship between the two men handcuffed to each other. So there is something real. There is something real and there is something created there. So the real factors about Mr. Aston and his fellow passenger, the other fellow passenger, will be disclosed at the end of the story. And how it is being disclosed? It's only through the observation of the other fellow passengers. Now let's see the main events of the story. Miss Fairchild meets an old acquaintance, Mr. Aston, on a train. So the first incident, a few turning points are there in the story. What's the first turning point? Miss Fairchild meets an old acquaintance, Mr. Aston, on a train. Mr. Aston's hand is handcuffed to another man. So there the story taking one another turn. Miss Fairchild recognizes Mr. Aston. So it's the third one, or the third turning point of the story. And the fourth one is the man whose hand Mr. Aston's hand is handcuffed says that Mr. Aston is a marshal and he himself is a convict. So the person with whom Mr. Aston's hand is handcuffed, he is trying to justify that Mr. Aston is the marshal and he is a convict. The next event or the turning point of the story is the two men take leave from Mrs. Fairchild, go to the smoke room. So after the conversation, after the interaction between Miss Fairchild and Mr. Aston, the two men who were handcuffed together, they take leave from Miss Fairchild and go to the smoker room. And finally, the last turning point is two passengers seated nearby reveal the identity of Mr. Easton and the other man. So once they left the compartment, the two passengers who were also traveling with Mr. Easton and the other man, they discovered or they disclosed the real identity of Mr. Easton and the other man. So these are the main events which are taking place in this particular story. So I hope that you have got a little idea about the story. And in the next class we will be discussing further about the other elements of this chapter. With this, I would like to wind up today's class. Thank you.